Hello, hello, it is Raccoon back at it with a new video. This one is on, is charisma good? The answer is yes, it is very good. There are a few exceptions. So let's just jump right in here. What does charisma do? So let's go in the stat page, click on it. It affects outgoing damage by guests and pets, and it reduces your dragon's companion's cooldown. So if you hop into the options, turn on manual pet actions, your pet dragon will gain skills, and it will be able to use like all its powerful skills on cooldowns, and charisma reduces them. So it is very good because charisma, like protection, has a heal and a shield, and lower cooldown on that means more defenses, and magic and fighting have higher damage abilities. So more charisma means more usage of them and more damage. So some amount of charisma is good on all classes except for a few of them. This is because, as we're going to talk about, through gear, so this is just a regular setup. You could either use DDR, or I'm using Eulins to make this easy. You can reach, this one's a little bit easier. Let's reset this. When you're putting your stats in, you can put points into dex because you want to deal damage, and because you want to survive. And you have 45 leftover points, and those will go into charisma if you want to deal the most damage. So we did a little test here. This is with ninja, 200 dex, 45 charisma. Let's say you put those 45 points into int because you want to deal more damage. You gain, it was 1299, now it's 1318, so you gain 19 points of damage per turn. So you deal 19 more damage per turn by taking int. But let's go into this great calculator made by Durs. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I will shout him out no matter what. But let's say you input the amount of minus res that ninja does during its combo. So this is the whole ninja combo, and you are applying minus res during most of it. And you look at the damage that you would deal from your dragon. So it's a little hard to read, but at 0 charisma with magic and fighting, you would deal 245 damage per turn on average. But at 50 charisma, you do 281. So you should have 50 charisma through just your gear. Let's turn off simple stat info. So from my gear, I'm getting 67, so we're already at 50. By putting these extra 45 points in, I'm going to 100 points of charisma, and that is a 52 damage per turn increase if you have both magic and fighting. And let's go over here. If you just have fighting, you're going from 50 to 12 DPT to 245 DPT, which is a 32 damage per turn increase. And 32 or 52 are both more than 19, so it is rather good. That's kind of the reason why most people will take 100. You should never have less than 100, because that's what you can gain through gear and stats, and it's going to be more damage than you can deal on most classes. There are a few exceptions. We're going to talk about them down here, but most 99% of the time, you're going to want to put those extra 45 points into charisma to get 100. But if you put more than 100 points in, you'd have to take them from somewhere. So let's look at this. I could go into this stat trainer, and I could say, what if my pet would deal more damage than me? So this is saying, so what if I want to put more points into the charisma to have it deal more damage, and will that increase my total damage per turn dealt? So this one I have 150. Let's turn on back on simple stat info. I have 150 charisma, and I drop down a few 40 points of dex about. And that's where this big sheet comes in. And it says, if I drop down my 40 points of dex, I would lose 60 damage per turn. But I could gain more damage per turn. In Ninja's case, during its burst, it does not gain more damage per turn. As you can see, 200 dex is the winner. It has the highest number here. It has the highest number here. So, putting more points into Charisma will not make your damage or your dragon deal more damage than it can make up from you losing points of dex, if that makes sense, for Ninja's 9-turn burst. Okay, so I'm going to start explaining what this chart that I made is and how much charisma you should take on classes, or what is quote-unquote optimal based on this calculator. There's like about 1,000 caveats that make this untrue, but we're gonna try to get into this and say what it is and then what the exceptions to this is. So let's hop into that. So this is looking at the Pirate's 8-turn burst. So they're split up into different classes. So Pirate 8-turn burst, we go to our calculator, we go into the damage per turn chart, pick up Pirate's burst. So this is an 8-turn Pirate burst. We plug it into our build. I changed up the build so the damage per turn is going to look a little bit different. But we take this number and we put it into, boom, here. So that's going to be our damage per turn using these different builds. So then we go into this charisma calculator and we figure out the amount of res is happening. So we have 4 out of our 8 turns have minus 30 res. So on average, we're going to deal 15% more. And then we get our damage numbers here. So this is if you have magic plus fighting with 100 charisma, you deal 322 damage per turn, 377 with 150, and 417 with 200. And those are plugged in here. And then we simply add this number to the damage per turn that we calculated, and we figure out what is the quote-unquote optimal damage, the optimal dragon setup and charisma to deal the most damage per turn. And you see, if you take 200 strength with 100 charisma, your highest damage, if you have only one, would be a fighting dragon. But if you have both, magic and fighting, you deal a lot more damage per turn over this 8-turn burst. At 150, you see, you deal more with magic and fighting, and then these are a bit less. And then at 200, you see that magic as the solo stat, like if you have a dragon with only magic or only fighting, overtakes at 200, but you deal less damage if you have both, if you have 200. So that's kind of how to read this thing and what it is. So now let's go over kind of every single caveat to this damage per turn chart. So most of these calculations for damage per turn are during the burst. So it's burst, 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 burst. So this is kind of the max damage per turn that the class can possibly deal. And it's not super indicative of how the class would perform all the time. So let's take Pirate, for example, because we're on Pirate. Would I use this combo? Probably not. Actually, Sea Legs, Fury, Backstab, Curse. Yeah, it seems like a normal combo I'd use, but then I have to wait for Sea Legs to get, or Fury to get off cooldown. I have to wait for Curse to get off cooldown. Cannon, Curse. So I'm not going to be like shooting this combo back to back to back to back. So most of the time, my damage per turn is going to be a lot lower than this. So that is when more charisma is going to start popping off harder. So if during the burst, more charisma is dealing top damage out of your class, kind of outside of your burst, charisma is going to be really good. So, okay, post editing, recording, trying to fix some stuff up. To do this damage sheet is assuming that you're using the highest damage attack you have every single turn you have it. So that's what the damage per turn of the dragon is. But if you spend turns using scales, using your heal, using your other stuff, your damage per turn is going to be a lot lower. So it might still be better to go fighting over magic, or having more main stat than charisma. You're just gonna have to figure out yourself. I'm gonna make a little note here that this is Ka is better the longer you fight, because you won't always have your cooldowns up, so this number is going to increase. So that's going to be the same for Paladin. It's going to be the same for BDL, kind of. So the BDLs are calculated at 30 stacks of Bulwark. So these damage numbers are a little bit inflated. So during the early turns, you're going to be seeing more damage per turn from these dragons than you would. The dragon's going to be a higher part of your damage compared to your personal damage. So charisma is better. Actually, this is a loop, so this one's actually pretty accurate, but it's a loop at max. Ninja is a big one because it does its whole burst combo, and you deal, with 200 dex, you deal 1530 damage, but if you go 200 charisma, you deal basically about the same amount of damage, but then during your flop, you're going to see increased damage. Death Knight is one of the exceptions, so we'll talk about this guy a bit later. This is Wrath Dragon Lord, 14 turns burst plus flop. So we did the 5-turn burst, and as you see during the 5-turn burst, your magic and fighting dragons are dealing pretty good damage at 200 int, and then you're losing damage the more int you sacrifice. But when you include the flop, you see that the 200 charisma dragon kind of carries later on. So I think that's pretty interesting, pretty cool. Ranger is also kind of an exception, and Techno is also an exception. So I put these on here. I misspelled that. Exception. Because we are going to talk about them. Oh, so another thing to look at the chart, if you have 100 charisma and you only have to choose between one of either fighting or magic, take fighting. If you have if you are going to put more charisma into your dragon and you have to choose between either magic or fighting, get to 200 charisma and take 200 magic. Yeah. So, let's talk about speed running now and how cool this is. So, this entire sheet is saying, how do I optimize damage if I take points from my main stat and I turn it into charisma, will my dragon deal more damage than me? So that's what this sheet was trying to optimize. But what if, let's go over here, what if we take points from endurance and turn them into charisma? So that means we get all the damage, the max DPT of our class, let's say ninjas, 1291, and let's take the max damage per turn from a dragon, 358, and we get a pretty big number. So let's do equals this plus this. This number is going to be bigger than every number on the chart. So, pretty simple. This is how you deal the most damage, and this is how you speedrun. So, how much endurance? Let's go back to the sheet. It says, how much endurance can you lose to deal more damage? And the answer to that is, in my opinion, which ring are we using to show this off? We're using Eulins. So we can lose up to 100. So with Eulin's Charm, we need 133 Charisma, and we can pump the rest into the other one. So let's get that. 33, 100, max dex, and end. So we have lost. I'm just showing you, we have 200 charisma and we have our max dex. Very cool. And most importantly, our immobility plus all is still 100, so we're still stun immune. So that is why I think 100 is a good amount of charisma to lose in order to deal more damage. So when you lose endurance, you are going to lose HP. And is that a big deal? Let's check. So let's grab ninjas real quick. So let's go equals boom plus boom. Get the max DPT from ninja. 1649. So compared to, I just said that we're not going to talk about burst loop because ninja can't do this, but let's compare it to this number. So you would deal a total of 120 more damage per turn over the course of this 9-turn burst. So that is going to be 120 times 9 equals 1080 damage. So by doing this, by sacrificing 500 HP-ish, you are now gaining 1080 damage. And let's say this damage kills something. So let's say you're fighting a boss and this damage kills the boss, and therefore you don't have to shield their attacks or you don't have to take their damage. So let's say this kills the boss 2 turns earlier. Or 1 turn earlier because we're dealing 1,000 damage per turn. So this is about 1 turn earlier of a kill. During that 1 turn, could that boss hit you for 500 damage? And that's all the end. Like, hypothetically, if that boss hit you for 500 damage and you didn't take that damage because you killed them earlier, you have now saved all that HP, and now you're also dealing more damage. So, speedrunning strats are good. Very good. Okay, let's hope no one uses this bot while I'm here, but let's compare DDR to Eulin's Charm. So, basically, Eulin's Charm has a big charisma stat, and DDR has kind of everything else. So, how big of a deal is this? It is kind of a big deal, and we're just gonna solve this kind of on this sheet of paper. I've done the math here, so it says use Eulins if you are sacrificing main stats for Ka. And then it says use DDR if you only want 100k or are sacrificing both main stats and 4k. So these are the rules. Use Eulins if you're sacrificing only main stat because its charisma plus main stat is higher than this is DDR's charisma plus main stat. So you're gonna end up with more main stat and charisma. But when you include end to all of this, if you're trying to balance charisma, main stat, and end, DDR is gonna win by like a little bit, and then has like better other stats. So keep that in mind. But also keep in mind if you're doing speedrunning strats with DDR. Let me just show this off real quick. It is 50, 100, max dex, and -1. It is this to 200 charisma. You end up with more dex, but you do not end up stun immune, which might be a problem if you get stunned. So that is the comparison. RAP stun immunity for speedrun. And then 1K versus Wings of Eternal Light. This is another small question. This one has crit, this one has charisma. So you're thinking, oh, if I want to maximize my charisma, I could use this. But 5 end is literally nothing. So you just take 5 out of your endurance and put 5 into charisma. And then Wings of 1,000 Flames has +5 crit and bonus, and has the -10 health, and it's better to use. So I don't like Wings of Eternal Light, and just use 1K. Okay, is that what I want to talk about? Yes, is speedrunning worth it? Yes, it is. The reason you get to 100 charisma in most classes is because you have the extra 45 to put in. But for classes like Ranger and Techno, you don't have that extra 45, so it's not as good. Ranger's a little bit weird because since it has split main stats, you lose half as much from taking waypoints. So if you go -50 to get 50 more charisma, you're losing maybe 2 or 3 damage breakpoints when another class would lose 5. But as soon as you start, like if you're going from 50 to 100, you have to take. So you lose damage from there. It's only kind of like add 200 where you start gaining a real boost. But it is disproportionately good at 200 charisma because of how Ranger works. So this is I want to give a shout out to Ranger, even shout out for being so cool. Basically, whenever Ranger uses its class shield or defensive moves, it loses focus, and then you have to regain focus if you want to start dealing more damage. But by having like a reduced scales cooldown or a reduced heal, you can mitigate damage through charisma and then keep being in your big damage state longer. So it's not shown here, but it is really good. It's also really good with the speedrunning strat where you reduce end to increase your charisma, so that's another shout out to it. So try it out with Ranger. I think it's really good. Let's talk exceptions. So if your damage is more than 1300 per turn, you will deal like straight up. If like this number is more than 1300 damage per turn, you will deal more not using charisma. So things like Chaos Weaver, things like Death Knight, situationally Doom Knight, like if you're doing your huge burst combo, and Corrupted Doom Epoch, you're gonna deal more damage not using charisma, as you can see calculated here. It does mean that you won't gain the defensive capabilities of charisma. So as it said, more scales and more heals. It's more defense, so you won't gain that, but you will gain like slight damage. So that's something to note. And then if you have weird stats and or gear, charisma is less good. That's another thing with Death Knight. It does not gain a lot of charisma from gear. So as you can see, in a normal class, if we go to simple stat info off, we gain 51 charisma from just gear. If you equip the full Death Knight set, I think you get 11. It's not a lot. So you don't get to 100 charisma as easily with Death Knight, so it's like not as good. So that's something to note. Weird stats, Technomancer and Ranger. So they want to stay like kind of around 50 because Techno is weird because it really wants wisdom instead of. It really wants int, wiz, and end, and you can't really take one of those away. Okay, we're gonna do exceptions to the exceptions. When you need scales or another skill to line up properly. So let's say you're doing a burst combo and you need your Nova to be off cooldown because you just need to nuke someone, and then it's on a 1 turn cooldown and you die. So that is when you might need to have charisma, even though your class isn't great with it. So think Techno's more of a skills class, but with Chaos Weaver or Death Knight, you might see this, like where you need to have your one of the Dragon's Burst skills to be off cooldown, and it isn't. So that's one case where you might take charisma when it's not good. Or the big one is when you take scales when it's not good. I think I saw Durs do this with Techno, where he put in a lot of points in charisma to get his scales rotation to line up. So basically, this is kind of like when you think you might need it, like if you have an 8-turn rotation, like Draco in Fallen Purpose, he claws you every 8 turns. So if you have 200 charisma for scales, you're gonna hit every other claw in that thing. So you only have to shield. You only have to shield every other one with your main character, and then you shield the other one with your dragon if you have 200 charisma. So that's another kind of exception where you might want charisma when you don't have, even though it's not good on your class. But note that you can stack charisma. So here's my charisma stack, the items, and you get plus 144 charisma. So this is really good for kind of stacking. So you only need a 56 charisma investment in order to reach 200. So you don't have to go all the way to 149 to have this constant to have constant 200 charisma. You don't need it. You only need it for that one turn where you're using that one skill and you want it back. So before you start investing into charisma, just for that extra shield or that extra Nova or whatever, consider charisma stacking. And then another exception to the exception is, can you drop end instead of main stat? I know for Ranger, this is something that I do a lot. Shout out to Ranger. This is the speed running build where you just run very little end, a lot of strength, a lot of dex, a lot of charisma, and you just pump out damage and kill things before they kill you, pretty much. So it can be a real help with Ranger. It can help on DK a little bit if you like go 200 dex and 200 charisma, and then you deal insane damage compared to like each individually. It's a little disgusting, but certainly something that you could do. So yeah. Okay, I'm gonna end this video by saying which classes I would consider going, or what level of charisma I would consider for classes. Endgame going crazy. Anyway, here's what I would consider. Doom Knight, probably 100 for most of the time. Your whenever you stick to minus evil, your minus res isn't affecting the dragon because it goes to your weapon. Your dragon can't deal evil damage, so it's not like buffing your dragon's damage as much. So I would stick to 100, and then I'd consider charisma stacking for scales, because you don't have a shield, and having more shield uptime is good. Archivist is a charisma class. I talked to Light Flare a lot about this, and he says charisma is really, really good on Archivist. So, big shout outs to Arc. It can gain a lot of damage through gear swapping, so it can be on kind of higher damage gear more of the time, which offsets the lack of stats somewhat. So it's good. Epochs, I don't really know about Epochs, but I don't know, might be good. Cthulhu Adept, I do want to try with 200 Charisma instead of main stat, because it does not do a lot of damage outside the Cthulhu rotations, so I think you can make up that damage through Charisma, and it might be interesting. So I'm going to try it out. I'll tell you guys how it is. Panda isn't real. Epochs still aren't real. Ranger is really good with Charisma. I like it as a I like speed running with Ranger by having like high main stats, high charisma, low ends. It's really good. So try that out. Death Knight is not very good with charisma. You could try speed running with it, but Death Knight likes its HP because it has low resistance stats already, and so maybe not the best. Paladin is probably a charisma class because it deals very low damage. So charisma just kind of deals more damage than it. So consider it. Pyro, I was talking to Cryomancer recently, and he was saying that he doesn't like charisma, and he tested it, and I agree with him. Not the best. Technomancer is also not the best with charisma, but if you need it to stack for scales or whatever, it's useful, so consider that. Epochs aren't real. Bulwark, when I did the calculations for Bulwark, I did it at max stacks, but while it's ramping up, Dragon basically outdamages you every turn, so I would recommend using some more charisma than the classic 100. Wrath Dragonlord's kind of weird. You could use it 200 charisma or more charisma if you're doing like a lot of flopping, but usually your burst is good enough that you should just stick to the classic 100. Ninja is something I want to try out more with 200 charisma because I think it would actually be really good, but I'm still gonna have to test that out, so don't quote me on this one yet, but I think Ninja might be a charisma class. Pirate, I'm gonna take more charisma. I just did a bunch of Pirate, and I didn't try it out, so I guess I'll have to play some more. Chaos Weaver, do not do it. Chrono Z, this isn't a real class either, so we're not going to talk about it. Anything B and below, pretty much it doesn't deal enough damage to out damage dragons, so you should take charisma like all the time. Yeah. Like whenever you're like in the B and below tier, your class either doesn't have enough damage or it doesn't have enough shielding or healing to make it good. So having more charisma gives your dragon more healing and shielding and more damage to make up for the fact that your class doesn't have it. So high charisma dragon can redeem a lot of these. Not really gonna talk about it, but I think that's cool. I was actually talking to Baltheon, and he was using the Charisma Luck Balltails event tail for endgame because Charisma is better than other stats. So I thought that was funny. So yeah, Charisma is good. Peace.